Today we are taking a deep dive into those incredible happy chemicals, the ones that make us feel, oh, so good. You guys sent us a ton of material about them: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins.
It's amazing how these chemicals aren't just about that fleeting feeling of happiness. They're actually deeply connected to our survival instincts going back millions of
Wait,
years.
really? So, it's not just about feeling good, it's about, not getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger.
Exactly. These neurotransmitters, they're basically messengers in our brains, and they evolved to reward our ancestors for doing things that helped them survive back then.
Makes sense.
Things like finding food, getting resources, and connecting with others were super important back then. I mean, vital for staying alive.
Okay, so let's unpack these happy chemicals one by one. Starting with dopamine. Everyone's always buzzing about dopamine. What's the deal with dopamine?
You can think of dopamine as your brain's own personal hype man, getting you all excited about the possibility of a reward.
Ooh, I like that.
It's that feeling of anticipation, the thrill of the chase. That's what kept our ancestors going, motivated to hunt, explore, and always strive for more.
So it's not even about getting the reward itself. It's all about the pursuit.
Precisely. And that's the interesting part. Once you actually get the reward, that initial dopamine rush, well, it kind of fades away.
Ah, that explains why that new phone feeling disappears so quickly.
Exactly. You're already on the hunt for that next dopamine hit.
So are we all just stuck in this loop of chasing a feeling we can never actually catch?
That's a great question. And that's why understanding how dopamine works is so crucial. The key is to harness that dopamine drive in a healthy way. By setting multiple goals like short-term, medium-term, and long-term, you always have something exciting on the horizon.
Makes sense.
This keeps the dopamine flowing, and you avoid feeling bummed out when you achieve just one goal.
It's like having a treasure map with multiple X's, always keeping things interesting. Okay, we talked about dopamine now. What about oxytocin? Isn't that the cuddle hormone?
Yes, oxytocin is often called the love hormone or the cuddle hormone. It's released when we feel that sense of trust and connection, especially through physical touch.
Okay, but why did this evolve? I mean, was hugging really a survival tactic back in the day?
Well, think about it. Our ancestors relied on each other for protection, finding food, and raising children.
Sure.
Oxytocin strengthened those social bonds, making it more likely for them to cooperate and support one another. It was basically the glue that held those early human societies together.
Wow. So it's not just about warm fuzzies, it's about survival.
Exactly.
Okay, more hugs, more survival.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
What about serotonin? Where does that fit into all this?
Serotonin is often linked to feelings of confidence and social standing. Like when you absolutely nail that presentation at work or finally master a new skill.
Ah, yes, that feeling of being on top of the world.
Exactly. That's serotonin giving you that I'm the boss feeling.
So are we all just hardwired to climb that social ladder for that serotonin boost?
Well, that's where things get a little tricky. While serotonin is linked to achieving status, it's not always about being the alpha in every situation. In fact, constantly seeking serotonin through external validation can actually backfire.
Hold on, how so? I mean, doesn't feeling good about yourself mean you're doing something right?
It does, but the key is where that feeling is coming from. If your sense of worth is solely based on what others think, you're on shaky ground. It's like building your house on someone else's land. You're always at risk of being evicted.
Whoa, okay, that's a powerful analogy. So how do we build that sense of self-worth on more solid ground?
Instead of chasing external validation, focus on building your own skills, celebrate your own wins, and recognize your own value. That internal sense of, I'm good at this, is far more sustainable than needing others to tell you you're worthy.
So it's like instead of waiting for a gold star from someone else, you give yourself one. Love that. Okay, we've got one more happy chemical to tackle: endorphins. What's the deal with those?
Endorphins are your body's natural painkillers. They kick in during those times of stress or physical exertion. Think of that runner's high after a tough workout, or that burst of energy you feel when you're facing a challenge.
So endorphins are like our inner superhero swooping in to save the day.
Well, they are pretty heroic, but remember they were designed for survival situations, helping our ancestors push past pain to escape danger or secure resources.
So what happens when we try to trigger them outside of those life or death situations? Are we messing with the system?
It can be a bit tricky, relying on endorphins through things like extreme exercise, or in more extreme cases, self-harm can be detrimental in the long run.
Yeah.
It's like relying on a crutch when you could be strengthening your leg muscles.
Gotcha. So how do we tap into those endorphins in a healthy way? Should we all be training for marathons?
Not necessarily. Laughter is actually a fantastic way to release endorphins without any negative side effects.
I like the sound of that.
Find activities that make you laugh genuinely and make time for them regularly. It's like a free endorphin workout.
Okay, so we've talked about the ups and downs of happy chemicals and how to avoid getting hijacked by those quick fixes. But is there anything we can do to actually boost our baseline levels of these chemicals? Like, can we make ourselves naturally happier?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the answer is yes, to a certain extent. Remember how we talked about these chemicals being linked to those survival behaviors? Well, even though we don't face the same threats as our ancestors did, we can still tap into those ancient pathways to give our happy chemicals a little boost.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give us the secrets.
Well, for dopamine, it's all about setting goals and working towards them. But it doesn't have to be those huge life-altering goals.
Right.
It can be as simple as learning a new skill, tackling a project around the house, or even just making a to-do list and checking things off. Each little accomplishment gives you that little dopamine boost.
So it's like those small victories lead to big rewards.
Exactly. It's like giving yourself a high five every time you cross something off your list.
I like that. What about oxytocin? How can we boost that feeling of connection?
Oxytocin is all about social bonding, so make an effort to nurture your relationships. Spend quality time with loved ones, engage in those meaningful conversations, and don't underestimate the power of physical touch.
Oh, yeah.
Hugs, handshakes, even just a pat on the back can go a long way.
So you're telling me hugs are the secret to world peace? I'm in. What about serotonin? How do we cultivate that sense of confidence and self-worth?
Serotonin can be a bit trickier since it's often tied to our social standing. But remember, true confidence, it comes from within. So focus on building your skills and talents, celebrate your achievements, and practice self-compassion. Acknowledge your strengths and celebrate your uniqueness.
So instead of seeking validation from others, it's about focusing on what makes us feel good about ourselves. It's like giving yourself a standing ovation instead of waiting for the applause.
Exactly. It's about building a strong foundation of self-worth that can weather those inevitable storms of life. And lastly, for endorphins, it's all about finding those healthy ways to challenge yourself.
Okay.
Regular exercise is fantastic for releasing endorphins, but it doesn't have to be grueling.
Right. Find activities you enjoy: dancing, hiking, swimming, anything that gets you moving and feeling good.
So it's not all about running marathons. We can find those endorphin boosts in everyday activities.
Absolutely. And don't forget about laughter. Laughter is a powerful endorphin releaser, so make time for things that make you giggle. Watch a funny movie, listen to a comedy podcast, or just hang out with people who make you laugh.
Laughter hugs, setting goals, celebrating achievements. It sounds like we have a lot of tools at our disposal to boost those happy chemicals.
We do. And remember, it's not about being happy all the time. It's about understanding how these chemicals work, making conscious choices, and creating a life that feels balanced and fulfilling.
This has been so insightful. I'm already thinking about all the ways I can apply this to my own life. But before we get too carried away, we have one more important topic to cover.
Yes, we've talked about how these chemicals work in a natural setting. But how does the modern world, with all its technology, social media, and constant stimulation affect our happy chemicals? That's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there. How is our always-on world messing with our ancient brain chemistry? Well, no break this time. We're just going to keep going.
Yeah.
So how exactly is our modern world messing with our happy chemicals?
Well, it's a big question because our world is a lot different from the one those chemicals first evolved in.
Yeah.
One of the biggest differences is just the sheer amount of information and stimulation we encounter every single day. Our phones are constantly buzzing, social media feeds are overflowing, and we're hit with news and entertainment from all over the globe, 24/7.
It's like our brains never get a break. So how does all of this impact our happy chemicals?
It's complicated, but it's becoming increasingly clear that all of this constant stimulation can actually throw those happy chemicals off balance. Take dopamine, for example.
Yeah.
Remember how it's all about that thrill of the chase? Well, in the modern world, that chase has become incredibly easy.
How so?
With just a few clicks or swipes, we can access endless entertainment information, even social interaction. It's all right there at our fingertips.
So instead of working for those dopamine hits, they're being handed to us on a silver platter. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling there's a downside.
You got it. While easy dopamine might seem appealing, it can actually lead to dopamine overload. And when we're constantly bombarded with all these dopamine-triggering stimuli, our brains can start to become desensitized to it.
So it's like we need more and more stimulation just to get that same level of satisfaction. That explains a lot about our, always-on culture.
Exactly. And this can lead to feeling restless, bored, and unmotivated, even when we're surrounded by things that are supposed to make us happy. We're chasing a high that keeps getting harder and harder to reach.
It's a little scary.
Yeah.
So what can we do about it? Do we need to ditch our smartphones and go live off the grid to like reset our dopamine?
Huh. While a digital detox can definitely be helpful, there are some less extreme things we can try. One key is to be mindful of how much time we're spending on activities that give us those quick dopamine hits, like scrolling through social media or playing video games or watching endless hours of TV. Try setting some limits for yourself and make time for activities that give you a more sustainable sense of satisfaction, like spending time in nature or pursuing a hobby or connecting with loved ones face to face.
So it's about being more intentional with our time and energy, choosing experiences that nourish us instead of just giving us that quick fix.
Exactly. And this applies to those other happy chemicals as well. For instance, oxytocin, the love hormone, is all about social connection. But in a world where we're interacting more and more through screens, it's easy to miss out on those genuine human connections that really nourish our souls.
Right. A text message just doesn't have the same impact as a warm hug, does it?
Not quite. So even though we're more connected than ever in some ways, it's crucial to prioritize those face-to-face interactions that boost those oxytocin levels. Make time for loved ones, join a club or a group, or even just strike up a conversation with someone new at the coffee shop. Those real-world connections are crucial.
That's great advice. Now, what about serotonin, the confidence chemical? How does the modern world affect that?
One of the biggest challenges with serotonin in this digital age is that constant comparison we're subjected to, social media in particular, can create a very distorted view of reality. We're constantly seeing these perfect lives, these amazing vacations, these incredible achievements, and it's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking everyone else is winning while we're falling behind.
It's like everyone else is living their best life on Instagram,
Yeah.
and we're stuck with, reality.
Exactly. And that can really take a toll on our serotonin levels. It can make us feel inadequate, insecure, just plain bad about ourselves. And remember, serotonin is all about that sense of social dominance, that feeling of being valued and respected. But when we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, especially those carefully curated online personas, we can really start to feel like we're falling short.
So how do we avoid falling into that comparison trap? Should we all just delete our social media accounts?
Well, that's one option, but for a lot of us, it's not very realistic. A more practical approach is to be more mindful of how social media is making us feel. If you find yourself constantly comparing yourself to others and feeling bad about it, maybe it's time to take a break, or at least curate your feeds a little more carefully. Unfollow those accounts that trigger those negative feelings and instead follow people who inspire you and make you feel good.
So it's about creating a more positive and supportive online environment for ourselves, surrounding ourselves with, virtual cheerleaders instead of critics.
Precisely. And remember, true confidence, it comes from within. So focus on building those skills and talents, celebrate those achievements, and practice self-compassion. Acknowledge your strengths and celebrate your uniqueness. The more we focus on our own journeys and our own growth, the less we'll be swayed by all those external comparisons.
This is all such great advice. It seems like the main takeaway here is to be really aware of how our modern world is impacting those happy chemicals and to make conscious choices that support our overall well-being.
Absolutely. It's not about demonizing technology or retreating from the world. It's about striking that balance, about making
Yeah.
those conscious choices that allow us to enjoy the benefits of modern life without sacrificing our mental and emotional well-being. It's about being the conductor of our own happy chemical orchestra, so to speak.
I love that analogy. So as we wrap things up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from today's deep dive?
Remember, you have more power over your happy chemicals than you might realize. By understanding how they work and making those conscious choices, you can really create a life that feels good from the inside out. It's like having the user manual for your own brain, and trust me, it's a fascinating read.
This has been such an eye-opening exploration into the world of happy chemicals. We've explored their evolutionary origins, their role in our modern lives, and most importantly, how we can harness their power to create a more balanced and fulfilling life. So go out there and experiment with those happy chemicals in your own life. You might be surprised at